with the ritual, which will become a feature of daily life in Jamaica. I don't believe that this will go away. It will probably be with us and become part of the things we do on a day-to-day basis. Remember, wash your hands, sanitize. If you can't get to wash your hands, if you have to sneeze or cough, do so in a disposable tissue. If you don't have that, then the next best thing is in the bend of your arm. But even then, try not to touch, spread in terms of having sneezed or cough. Don't touch your face. Try as best. It's hard for me to do it, and I'm asking people to do it, but please don't touch your face. And then maintain social distancing. I'm looking at a minimum audience here today, and everyone is more than 3 feet apart, which is good. So as we had promised last week that we would now have our press conferences done virtually, online, and we are now living up to that. So, Cabinet met today. We didn't meet virtually. We met at the Cabinet offices. And we had a fairly long agenda, mostly reviewing measures that are already in place and figuring out ways to improve those measures. We started off by looking at how we were managing crisis. We had an offer from a private sector consulting firm to work with the government to establish a crisis management support unit, which we have decided will be attached to the Office of the Cabinet, and that will support the ministers, support the Office of the Prime Minister, support the Cabinet as a whole in our decision making, in providing us with information, with scanning the horizon for new threats which we have not factored in, and with helping us to organize and strengthen the management of the crisis response. And I think that that is a good thing for the government, good thing for the Cabinet. It will certainly help us to be able to deliver the service that the public is expecting of their government. We have made a decision not to seek an extension of the quarantine in Bull Bay. So at midnight tonight, that will come to an end. This is not to say that the residents of Bull Bay should not continue to maintain a high level of vigilance and caution, all the social distancing and the recommended hygiene practices. The Ministry of Health has 8 persons, I gather, under surveillance for testing, and they are awaiting the results of those tests. Those persons remain under quarantine, and the Ministry of Health has a heightened presence and surveillance of the Bull Bay community. So even though the quarantine will be lifted, the Ministry of Health will have a presence and will continue its surveillance of the area. At this point, I will invite the Minister of Health to give his update.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So the latest numbers as it relates to persons who have tested positive for the coronavirus, COVID-19, are 34 new confirmed cases within the last 24 hours. So of the total number, 20 are imported cases, with, of course, 1 death, which was announced earlier, and 8 are import-related cases. And 2 are under investigation. The new cases are as follows: an 87-year-old male from Manchester with a travel history, which includes New York, a 51-year-old male from St. Catherine with a travel history that includes New York, and a 52-year-old male with no travel history but a close contact of a visitor from Canada who reported ill upon return to Canada. And the fourth is a 56-year-old male from Manchester with no travel history, but was in contact with tourists from several countries. And the investigation as it relates to this particular individual continues. In terms of testing, we have now tested 189. We have done 189 samples, tests. So that would be 250, sorry. 250 tests. 30, as said earlier, would have tested positive, and the rest negative, with 2 pending. We will elaborate more. Maybe I'll ask the CMO, well, the PM will ask the CMO later on to elaborate more on the testing method, because I know that's a point of discussion and some amount of contention. But we have expanded the testing methodology to look at not just persons who we have traced, but also persons with severe upper respiratory ailment, in an attempt to establish a control group to see to what extent the virus may be spreading throughout the community. And that is giving us a good indication as to the rate of spread, and the CMO, when she speaks, can give better details on that. But so far, I think we're encouraged in terms of what we have found as it relates to that. In terms of the 7 and 8 Mile Bull Bay, the Prime Minister spoke about the quarantining ending tonight at 12 o'clock. But just to reiterate that we will remain vigilant, and to the extent that there may be 1 or 2 householders who we are recommending for home quarantine, those persons are going to be expected to remain as such. As it relates to current piece, we visited some 50 householders so far, 217 persons. Their health status checked, monitoring continues, and we have 2 persons in isolation within that community, and we continue to provide critical support. The final point I'd raise here before I hand back to the PM is that we are very concerned about persons who have come in over the last few days, and we'll be taking some measures to announce the flight numbers and encourage those persons to home quarantine. And I know the PM will comment a little more on that as it relates to the extent of our engagement to ensure that that is followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I want to pick up from where Minister Tufton left off. We are at still very early days in the epidemic. And we have managed, by virtue of the measures that have been put in place, to keep the numbers relatively low compared to others in the region. But this could change overnight. It could change in an instant. And today we examined some of the threats that could contribute or trigger a spike in our numbers. The biggest threat presently to our numbers spiking would be persons who returned to Jamaica within the last 14 days, specifically those who returned from the 18th of March to the 23rd of March, those who have not kept themselves in quarantine and who are circulating in the population, who could possibly be asymptomatic or symptomatic and are spreading the disease in the population. So, having examined that threat, we have decided, which I had already put into the public domain, that we will be examining all the manifests that have come in, that is the manifests of aircraft, passenger aircrafts that have come in, which will provide us with the information of persons who have come into the island. We will continue to publicize all the flight numbers and dates of flights that have come into the island during that period of time. And we are asking citizens to pass on information to the relevant authorities using the various lines that have been provided by the Ministry of Health of persons who you may have information on, that they have come into the island, but they are not self-quarantining. We need to know. The manifests are with the police and the Ministry of Health, and they have been instructed to identify the persons on the manifest and to conduct checks based upon addresses and other leads to find persons who have come into the island and who are not quarantining. So we will be visiting addresses. Upon visiting someone's address that is on the manifest that should be in quarantine, if that person is not in quarantine, then the Ministry of Health and the law enforcement will make the necessary processes activated, meaning that you will either be warned or charged, depending on, of course, the circumstances. But after that, if you are checked again, you will definitely be charged for breaching the quarantine rules. We, at this time, can take no risks in our efforts to control the spread of this very dangerous disease. So I use this now not as a threat, not as a warning, but as advice to those who have come into the island between the 18th and the 23rd and who are not maintaining the quarantine rules, that the police and the Ministry of Health have been instructed to go through the manifest, to identify your name and match that with an address, to visit the address, and to determine whether or not you are actually maintaining the self-quarantine or the home quarantine. If not, the government will make provisions for you to be housed in a state quarantine facility and to be charged for the breach. Again, we can take no risks. In advance of this, the government has developed a website to supplement the contact numbers that have been made available by the Ministry of Health, and Minister Tufton, I'm certain, will give you those numbers shortly. But I want to, for the benefit of the public, just read out the website. And for those persons who have come into the island between the 18th and the 23rd, it would be very useful for you to go on this website, fill out the questionnaire, and provide the information to the Ministry of Health so that we can be aware of your health status and be in touch with you to give you any support that you would need. This website is JAM COVID-19, that is JAMCOVID19 .moh.gov.jm. jamcovid19.moh.gov.jm. We spent a significant period of time in the cabinet discussing the economic support program. We have with us today the Minister